Most dentists aren't trained to run businesses, let alone scale them. This is the TechDental Podcast for dental leaders who want more than just tips. We give you systems, strategies, and straight answers. I'm Dr. Randeep, and each week I sit down with the operators, AI founders, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who are reshaping what's possible in dentistry. If you want a smarter, scalable, future-proof practice, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome back to the TechDental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Randeep, and today we're diving into a part of dentistry that is undergoing a huge transformation right now. The front desk is the patient journey and operational hub that underpins everything inside a modern dental practice. And to explore this properly, we have someone who brings a rare combination of commercial firepower, operational discipline, and product vision. Today's guest is Subhash Mishra, Managing Director for the UK at Convene Group. Their platform is delivering self-service, check-in, payment, and appointment booking kiosks to clinics, practices, and hospitals. Convene has already supported more than 100 million patient visits across 1,300 healthcare providers. Before dentistry, Subhash built revenue engines at some of the biggest category leaders globally, including Doctify, Tinder, First Rail, WWE, and BT Sport. He has launched massive markets, built teams, developed products, and scaled services at a level very few in the dental sector can match, which is exactly why his perspective on automation, AI, and operational flow matters so much right now. Subhash, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Well, Randeep, thank you so much. It's probably the best introduction I've ever had. No, thank you so much. Absolutely honored to be on this podcast. We've known each other for a little while now, so I'm so glad we're finally making this happen.
Let's start with your background because it's not typical route into dentistry. You've scaled in consumer tech, entertainment, transport, health tech. What instincts from that world have translated best into the realities of dental operations?
Sure. So I think by way of background, as the MD of Convene Group in the UK and Ireland, I think what's really exciting, especially as I'm the son of two NHS clinicians myself, is that we work across a broad range of different healthcare verticals. So as you've kindly mentioned, hospitals, private medical and GP practices, and very excitingly also in the dental sector. And I love the dental sector because you have so many entrepreneurial thinkers in dentistry. And dentistry clearly covers not just your essential clinical treatments, but also really important sort of aesthetic and cosmetic treatments as well. And then to answer your question about how sort of the commercial instincts from other consumer tech sectors translate into dental, there's so many parallels because my role is, and what Convene does is we're about automating and eliminating manual administration. So we're not on the clinical side of dentistry, but we're about automating the front desk. And the process for earning trust from a dental group, whether that's an entrepreneur founded and controlled the dental group or PE-backed one, and how you do that in consumer tech, it's so similar because ultimately my role, I succeed if my clients achieve their desired outcomes. So in private healthcare, they're looking to increase revenues, reduce costs and unnecessary inefficiencies, but doing that whilst also enhancing the patient experience. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of private dental groups have. How do I enhance margins and experience at the same time? And so in terms of how we do that, it's similar, whether it's consumer tech or in the dental sector. First of all, it's about being able to articulate the client's opportunities and challenges as well as they can. And certainly in our niche, using our experience to maybe define that problem even better than they can themselves, just because we bring that expertise from working with 1,300 healthcare clients. So I think the first thing is about trying to understand their overall strategy, the KPIs they're trying to hit, but then also importantly, the trade-offs. So for as I briefly mentioned, how are we going to increase margins and enhance patient experience at the same time? And then it's also then about trying to understand if there is a sense of urgency, because all dental group leaders are very busy, as well as leaders of independent practices, because some of those independent practices are going to become, and we're seeing it already, are going to become the groups of tomorrow. So how do we jointly evaluate, is this a top 3 priority for them, their board, and if required, their PE investors? And so the way that we do that is that we will sign an NDA with a group. And being a former management consultant by training, I really enjoy creating that investment case where we'll spend a lot of time thinking about, if you had a Convene self-service kiosk, what's the impact of all the front desk resources that we freed up? If you redeploy that and you transform your team from being an admin team to a revenue growth team, what impact does that make in terms of answering calls that otherwise are missed, in terms of promoting dental plans, finance, cosmetic treatments, for example? So if you take, we will typically save a dental practice roughly 100 hours per month. It can go higher if it's a bigger practice, but call it 100 hours a month. So how do we translate some of the 100 hours into revenue growth? So we're often seeing that we can deliver, we're seeing already in the UK, 6 to 7% revenue uplift, which greatly outstrips our costs. So it's a good ROI. Then we're also looking at from the cost saving perspective as well, because especially with a lot of groups, the NHS contracts are a big percentage of that group's revenue. But as being a clinician yourself, it's a fixed price, regardless of how long it takes, whether they need 2 fillings or 7 fillings. And so with manual administration, it's costing roughly £1.20 for a dental practice in the UK to check in, take the payment, book the next appointment. That's costing about £1.20. Digital solutions like Convene do it for a fraction of that cost. So we're looking at not just the revenue growth, as we talked about a moment ago, but the cost reduction, which is really helpful, because then you can either use that cost reduction and revenue increase to grow your margin, but also maybe reinvest it in making sure you've got the best possible equipment, you've got the most welcoming decor, you've got the best possible staff, for example. And then finally, the impact on patient experience as well. I was speaking to a group last week, and some of their practices, it can be as many as 400 appointments a week. They have at times 10 people, sometimes 12 people queuing up to see the receptionist. And so with a digital solution, what can historically have been a long wait for the patient, if we can check in, process treatment, book the next appointment within seconds, it's great for the patient as well. Because I was formerly going to a more old school dentist, and I knew that I would have to show up 20 minutes before my appointment because of the waiting and the manual admin. With the more modern clinics, you can show up just a couple of minutes before. So I think in summary, to answer your point about how does the commercial thinking translate from consumer tech to health tech and within dental, whilst the sectors are clearly very different, the commercial thinking is very similar. And the questions that clinician founders, and there's many clinician founders within dentistry, whether they're PE backed or not, and they're PE investors who we meet as well, they're very similar questions to what we got asked in consumer tech, which is, why is this a top 3 problem for us to solve? What's the impact on margins? What's going to be the impact on patient experience? What does that implementation process look like? How long is it going to take us to see a return? It's all the same questions, but it's been honestly, as the son of 2 NHS clinicians, I absolutely love the health tech sector. It's clearly a very meaningful service that we provide to our communities, and the community of dental leaders and health tech leaders, it's something really quite special that you don't see in other tech sectors. So yeah, health tech is really close to my heart. It's just a very vibrant community we've got here in the UK.
The culture has shifted in automation, because historically, when people think about a kiosk, they think just check-in or forms. But I think, as you've articulated, it really touches on all aspects of the operations and ecosystem of a dental practice. And so I think really it's a cultural shift. And I think a lot of that's being driven by AI, by automation, and people's perception now of the power of actually joining the dots and operationalizing all the data that they have in their practices. I want to talk a little bit about transformation. Now, when a dental group deploys the solutions from Convene, what does a typical rollout timeline look like from, say, installation to some sort of measurable ROI? What should dental leaders realistically expect?
So typically a group starts off with trialing it at between 1 to 3 of their practices. And then generally speaking, we're quietly confident from our experience from working with 1,300 fantastic hospitals and practices that we can then generally earn the right for a larger rollout, which is amazing. And then in terms of time to value, we're seeing time to value within the first 2 to 3 months. So it's quite a quick process for us. And it's just because I'm supported by a fantastic team that knows healthcare. And then we've got within healthcare, sector special within healthcare. So I'm very lucky to have customer success and software developers that really understand the nuances of dentistry. So the process is really straightforward. It's maybe between the contract signing for, say, a 2 to 3 clinic trial and delivery of the self-service kiosks is typically like 4 weeks. And then just to give you a bit of background about what our kiosks do, you're right that the first kiosk that typically you might see in an NHS GP practice does just a simple thing like check-in, which is valuable. But what ours do is we do the check-in. We then because we integrate really deeply with various dental PMS systems, we can then also provide patients access to their medical history form or NHS FP17 form or GP17 in Scotland, because up to 60% of patients arrive at a practice without having filled out those forms. They can pay for their treatment. They can then book their next appointment and take a deposit. And then we can also promote other services. And that's what especially groups find very exciting about operational consistency. It's about how do I ensure if some groups have got in excess of 1 million appointments a year, how can I make sure that all of these patients get exposed to perhaps the right dental plan or a finance plan, or we can provide videos of before and after photos to help drive, for example, a smile makeovers consultation. To answer your question, typically within 2 to 3 months, they're seeing a return. And that's because we effectively perform the vast majority of manual tasks that a human receptionist would do, but we do it at the fraction of that price of a human receptionist. And we keep our pricing deliberately competitive so that clients get a quick return. And the reason why we're interested in then getting a quick return on their investment is because that then enables us to build that trust, to be trusted to have a longer term partnership. And then each group's different as well. They've all got their own nuances. And because we're a tech company at heart, each group likes to have maybe some bespoke functionality, bespoke branding. And then because we've got sector specialists within that team who might have seen that functionality requested, for example, in Norway or Sweden or Denmark or in the US or Australia, which are other countries that we work in, we can quickly turn those around as well. And so for me, it's really important. It's not just about keeping the C-suite, because usually it's the C-suite that'll make the decisions. It's typically the COO, the chief commercial officer, sometimes the founder of the group. But for me, what I love is that our biggest advocates for our service tend to come from the receptionists themselves and the practice managers, because they're the ones who are really excited to have their roles transformed from basic admin, because receptionists do that job because they're people's people, and it actually frees them up to progress in their own careers. So some receptionists end up taking more of a treatment coordinator role, and it's just a much more exciting role for them. So whenever I speak with receptionists, which we do quite regularly, especially when we're setting up and practice, they love it. They're like, you know what? I actually now have time to think, and actually now have time to properly provide a concierge service. So I'm really proud, for example, one of my clients is, because talk about groups, but one of my favorite independent clients is Dental. They just won last week Practice of the Year at the Private Dentistry Awards. And I'm so proud that we've supported their journey from squat practice to now being one of the best practices in the country. And a lot of that credit clearly goes to Dr. Suleiman Anwar and his very talented team. But in terms of what they're now able to do, because they can free up so much time, they do a really nice concierge service. Meaning when you arrive at Dental, they actually provide you hot towels and a coffee. So it's more like their customer journey is more akin to a 5-star hotel. And it's just because they're freeing up their receptionists to provide that really concierge level service, which previously was more difficult to do. They always had that ambition, but they didn't always have the time, being a very successful practice.
This is a real key point, because some of the worries around AI and automation is this going to cause people to lose their jobs. And then there may be something in other industries. But I think the unique thing about dentistry is there's always going to be this human in the loop. And again, what you describe about freeing up the front desk, freeing up the receptionist to actually then add so much more value, the human touches to the patients who are there. And I think that's really the great value proposition of a technology like AI and any kind of automation. So let's shift a little bit towards AI itself, because I think this is where dentistry is really heading at speed. Front desk automation, as you've described, is really evolving. You've got predictive workflows, dynamic scheduling, smart triage, and AI-driven recall nudges. What's Convene's vision for layering intelligence onto the front desk infrastructure that you've built?
So I think the biggest opportunity there is quite possibly in hospitals, actually. So we work with about 95% of hospitals in Norway at the moment, and we're excited to continue growing that in the UK as well. And specifically what makes me very excited is around using AI to attract trialists for clinical trials. I was speaking with one NHS trust in the north of England, and this trust is a very large trust. It's recruiting as many as 25,000 patients per year for clinical trials. And they also need to promote a number of different public health messages. So, whether that's about stop smoking campaigns, whether that's around getting your flu vaccinations or getting your annual health checks, or the sheer amount of patient volume that they have. And in the NHS, where budgets are tighter than ever, how can they still achieve these public health messaging and recruiting clinical trialists? And so this is where AI can be really helpful, because we integrate with practice management systems and practices and EHRs, which is the same thing, but in hospitals. We can then extract really relevant information from that EHR. So what we can then say to a patient, because our kiosks it's a very private and discreet hardware that we've got. So if someone's looking at that screen from most angles who isn't the patient, they can't see what's on the screen. But the vision that we're getting to is, as a patient's checked in, they can get a relevant message saying, you might qualify to be a candidate for a clinical trial based on your medical history. Please scan this QR code to learn more if you'd be interested. Or alternatively, the public health message is, if I think about, we're both of South Asian heritage, people of our background, and say our medical history, it might be a message along the lines of, have you considered a public health message on high blood pressure, diabetes? And then also, for example, a lot of trusts are trying to encourage people to donate blood. And there's certain groups that under-index in donating blood, for example. So at a high level, that's where I find AI really interesting, and I wanted to share that because most of our work in the UK so far has been with private sector organizations, even though in dentistry, a big chunk of those patients are on NHS contracts. But when I think about the challenges that NHS trusts have and their equivalents in other countries, in sending the right public health message to the right person, or making potential clinical trialists aware that they might be able to participate, I think that's so powerful. And because then I think what always excited me about healthcare and health tech is, although we're a tech company, we can contribute towards the broader well-being of society. I think that's so important. Business is so much more than hitting your revenue targets. That is important, but if your business can ultimately leave society in a better place than when it started, even in a small way, I think that's really powerful, and that's what good business really is.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the vision, and that's where I was going to go next with this. And it's interesting you mentioned hospitals, because from what I've found is in the dental world, there's a lot of data, but I guess the data at this stage is not as structured as you would have in a large hospital organization.
Yes.
It's all centralized just by design. And AI, any kind of automation or AI is only going to really be powerful if the underlying data architecture is standardized to the point that it can be used. So it's a really important point you made about hospitals. And I think that vision, I see it, dentistry heading that way as the consolidation's happening. You're getting these groups and DSOs. And I think people have really now cottoned on to the fact of the power of data and the key of, if you want to use a piece of technology to its full advantage, you really need that data standardization to be there. And you need that from the foundational aspect. So that's always something I try and really harp on about on this podcast, is giving dental leaders and independent dentists, owners, entrepreneurs, this kind of vision that get your data in order, because all these exciting tools that are coming out, you're only going to be able to use them to their full advantage if that foundation is there. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So if we go back from a CFO or an investor perspective, when you're speaking to some of these C-suite executives and some of these groups, automation sometimes is framed as just a cost saver. But as we both know, the real implementation is actually as a revenue engine. So when you're speaking with CFOs or VCs, what strategic argument tends to resonate most? Where do they see the real upside with this?
You know what, Randeep, it's really good that you mentioned CFOs, because a big trend in tech, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, is the CFO is an increasingly important decision maker and stakeholder. 3 or 4 years ago, say for product hours, it would have been the chief commercial officer and coup. It still is, but now the CFO is even more important, because ultimately they're the custodian of capital allocation. They want to make sure that they're investing their company's capital in the most efficient way. And so to answer your question about how do we get the CFO or the PE investors on board, it's about, first of all, talking about the outcomes, because ultimately all founders or C-suite leaders and practice managers and receptionists as well, I always think of myself as being in the game of delivering credible and scalable transformation and outcomes. My counterpart at my clients, to some extent, doesn't mind how the software was created. They just want to make sure, are you credible, reliable in a healthcare or dental context to deliver that transformation outcome? So what this means for CFOs is that they're trying, for me, what I try to explain to them, and they get it straight away, which is historically your front desk, and this is the vision and the transformation, your front desk has historically been a cost center. And that's because your front desk has typically been focused on very manual administration. And I talked to them then about the hidden cost of manual administration, which people don't fully realize, but as soon as you share it with them, they get it straight away, which is the problem, or the hidden cost of manual admin is there are inefficiencies. It takes too long for basic tasks to be completed, which is not great for patient experience, or from a cost perspective. It's not great from a patient experience because in dental practice, up to 30% of patients, 30% missed calls, sorry. So that's a lot of calls which aren't getting answered. And then I explained to them what happens if you allow these problems to continue. In essence, it's not a great patient experience. So these patients on the high street, there's often more than one dental practice to choose from. Patients are now very much consumers, especially in private healthcare. They want that same seamless journey that they're used to seeing at hotels, airports and retail. It's unnecessarily high cost is the second issue if you allow this issue to persist. And you're losing out on revenue growth opportunities because we know, for example, from Denplan has some great research that says that 61% of NHS patients are interested in private treatments. But typically in a dental practice, only 15 to 20% of patients purchase a dental plan, for example. And that's because your front desk is being held back by the time of manual administration. So ultimately it goes back to the transformation of, let's take a team that was historically a cost center and historically an admin team. We're going to turn it into a profit center and a patient engagement center. And we do that by freeing up that resource, so typically 100 hours for a dental practice. And they're freed up to answer those calls, answer the social media inquiries. Most dental practices are very big on Instagram. There's a lot of inquiries that don't get answered quickly enough. There's a lot of voicemails that receptionists see first thing in the morning. There's lots of patient outbound because on average, if you look at your patient base, typically only 20 to 25% of that patient base is active, meaning having booked an appointment in the last 12 months. So there's so much, you can see here, there's so much low-hanging fruit. And historically, CFOs, investors, CEOs, they're all very sharp people. They all know that this is an issue, but they've not had the time to go and grab that opportunities. And that's exactly where Convene comes in. And we also, through the kiosk, can promote the plans, the financing, for example. So I think, and then when we sign the NDAs, and then I use their data to model out what those outcomes look like. And it's always an editable spreadsheet. So then they always go in and then tweak it, which is totally fine. They can see the return. They can see how quick it is for them to get that investment back as well. And that's ultimately how we get the CFO. It's just at a very high level. It's less about just selling a story. It's about getting straight to the facts, which is these are your top three sort of revenue opportunities. These are your top three cost reduction opportunities. These are your top three opportunities or challenges to retain staff. This is how Convene helps. And this is how we quantify it. And then it's great because then usually that investment case normally earns us the right to have a trial at 1 to 3 clinics. We then tend to successfully achieve those KPIs during that trial period, which is typically 3 months. And then we earn the right thanks to the strong performance of my team and the software, to then roll out across the group in due course. So it always comes back to data and being credible and ultimately being scalable, because that's the other big challenge, which every investor or CFO wants to know is they want to understand and get that reassurance. Is this something which only works at a one practice level? Or is this something, if I'm involved with operating as many as a few hundred practices, is this scalable? And that's where the operational consistency is a hot topic. And digital services like Convene were proven to deliver that consistency. So whether it's a small practice, whether it's a very large one, whether it's one, we have some sites, not in dental, but we have some sites in private medical that don't even have receptionists, and they only use a self-service kiosk. I'm just really proud of the team that we've got a service that works across a lot of different settings.
Scaling tech inside dentistry is not easy. Where do you see the real friction? Is it the infrastructure, culture, leadership, regulation, or something deeper in the way maybe practices are structured? What's your experience of the scalability of tech, let's say, in a large group setting?
Yeah, so I think we're fortunate that we've been able to scale up in some very large groups. It's still very much a challenge, I would just say generally in health tech. And so I define scalability as two things. One, getting those first few clinics within a specific group and then subsequent rollout. So I think there's many different reasons why. I think what has helped in some ways is the PMS, because we deeply integrate with multiple dental PMSs and also broader medical PMSs, EHRs. So that really helps because we integrate very deeply with those, because any information is entered in our kiosk is automatically updated on the PMS, and we extract information from the PMS. So I think that really has helped. And some of the groups, especially those that have grown through a lot of acquisitions, they're in the process of consolidating and going down to, over time, just one PMS. So historically, that was a challenge, not just for Convene, but for lots of other providers. And then the other thing was around proven time to value as well. Because I think every leader I speak to in healthcare, they have very good intentions and they've got strong ambitions around, they want to do the right thing for the business and the patient. But naturally, they want to make sure, if I go with this, are you going to deliver the results that you've discussed? And so that's always a challenge for any business in health tech, is that you have to be patient. It's not like you speak with a very large group and you're going to be in all 100 practices overnight. And I also wouldn't want them to do. I also prefer to start small, learn the nuances, optimize it, and then we're ready to really go. So I think and then the third challenge is around, historically, patients were viewed as patients and not consumers. And now there's a lot of capitalists which are now changing that, which is one, patients themselves, they're used to seeing manual administration, particularly front desk, which is my niche. They're used to seeing a much slicker, seamless process in retail, in hospitality, at airports. So they're coming to expect that, especially in dentistry, we've got so much choice. You're also seeing it as we know, there's a lot of PE investors in dentistry, and they often have a broad portfolio of not just healthcare assets, but non-healthcare assets. So when I speak with some of the leaders at PE funds, and I talk about Convene, and interesting enough, Convene also works in the hotel sector. We work in car rental. We work in other sectors as well. And so one thing that they often say is, we actually have other portfolio companies, not in healthcare, that seem to be more advanced in solving manual administration. We think there's a case for doing this in healthcare as well. And then, of course, when the founders or CEOs meet their PE investors are often sharing those insights. And then the other big PE catalyst is, historically, PE funds were focused purely on financial engineering, but now driving the operational efficiency is as big a part of their thesis as financial engineering, or simply going to buy and build. And so again, they're saying, if we're acquiring a number of practices every quarter, we need to make sure we're not just buying 50 disparate businesses, that we're building one coherent, consistent business. So that, again, is opening up opportunities that maybe didn't exist 5 years ago. And finally, I need to say that the CEOs and founders within dental, they're very sophisticated people. They have reached their position for very good reasons, and they're naturally curious people. So I love meeting CEOs and dental founders. They're very curious people, and they're often seeing inspiration elsewhere, and they're very sharp. They're often saying to me when I meet them, I've seen solutions like yours at hotels, at car rental, in retail. I can see where it could fit in mine. So I think that, and hopefully that's giving you a little bit of overview of what the challenges were. And to some extent, they still exist. There'll always be challenges, but we're definitely seeing catalysts in terms of changing expectations from patients, changing approaches to how PE investors want to get more active in managing their investments. And then what's always consistent is the savviness and the curiosity of founders and CEOs in our industry as well.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown there, Subhash. And I think there's a lot to be learned from other industries. And I'm a big advocate of looking at other industries outside of dentistry. And there's so much that can be brought in now. And from my perspective, I think we're entering what I like to call the cognitive era in dentistry. So not just digitalizing tasks, but optimizing and intelligently orchestrating them. So you touched on this before with the front desk, that automation is not really about replacing staff, it's about elevating them. How do you see human teams evolving as automation becomes smarter and more embedded?
So I think it's a great question. And I agree with you that, frankly, dental groups or actually any business in the future, regardless of what sector you're in, at a very high level, they have to decide whether you keep the status quo in terms of your workforce or whether you have an AI enhanced workforce. So what's going to happen, I predict, is you're always going to have human beings, and very rightly so, on the front desk, but their role changes. And it's better for the patient and it's better for the front desk employee as well, because they're now free to take on more complex patient conversations. So they can really sit down and work with the dentist to ensure that the treatment plan, because the dentist will suggest the treatment plan, but they then need help from the front desk to make sure that treatment plan, that there's appointments get booked, for example, with the right clinician. So there's a more complex conversations that can happen when the front desk is freed up to really then talk about services that's going to help the patient as well. So those dental plans or those finance plans help patients achieve better oral health a lot quicker than they would otherwise. So it actually becomes a role where front desk people feel that they've actually got time to think and they've got time to work at the top of their ability range. Whilst unfortunately, most of the basic admin tasks that we essentially eliminate, I would say, are tasks that don't really stretch someone's thinking. So I think it's really exciting when you allow people to perform at the top of their abilities and really stretch themselves. You often get more happier employees. And ultimately, if you've got happier, more engaged employees, that ultimately feeds through to the patient experience and how patients care, because patient care in healthcare, clearly it's the clinician that's the most important piece, but there are softer aspects in terms of treatments more than just a successful service being provided or a complicated treatment being delivered to a clinically high standard. It's also about how does the patient feel welcome and cared for and seen and heard. And clinicians may not have time. Clinicians tend to do that when they're in the treatment room, but the front desk has a very important role in making the patient feel cared for as well. So I'm really excited about how AI is going to help people really perform at the top of their abilities and for patients to feel more cared for, not less.
Yeah, I really agree about the augmentation piece. I think it's something that can really free people up, and that's the exciting opportunity as we move forward into an AI first world.
Yeah.
Josh, it's your insights have been great, and it's been amazing having you on the podcast. We're coming to the last segment, and I always like to do a little lightning round at the end, which is a couple of quick fire questions. And it's really just to get in more into your mindset to see what makes you tick. So here goes, whatever comes to mind. The first question I have for you is, who's one entrepreneur or innovator that you would love to shadow for a day and why?
I would love to shadow James Dyson because I think his resilience is incredible, because he famously built, I think, nearly 1,000 versions of his bagless vacuum cleaner before he got his first order, which was at a Japanese department store. So that's something I've always admired about entrepreneurs. So I think that resilience, though, is at a particularly elite level. And also what I love about his business is fundamentally, I think that it's about a great business is fundamentally driven by having not just a great understanding of customer problems, but having world-class products. And I think Dyson, the performance of his products and the design are top-notch. They're so good that it sells itself. And it's a truly global business. His business is vertically integrated. He owns his own factories. He builds his hardware in-house. He builds his software in-house. We do the same thing at Convene because we like to keep a really tight lid on quality standards. I think James Dyson, what he's done, and on a global scale, if I could shadow him for a day, that would be amazing.
And what's one myth about AI in dentistry that you'd love to bust once and for all?
It's about that AI is replacing people. I think it's like we were discussing before. It's about an AI enhanced workforce. It's about freeing up the front desk to make patients genuinely feel cared for from the moment they walk into the practice, and being freed up from being an admin team, which isn't testing anyone's abilities, to being a revenue growth team, be able to perform at the top of their abilities. So I think that's the myth I'd like to burst, really.
What's one mindset shift that the next generation of dental leaders needs to really be able to harness what's coming with tech and AI in dentistry?
I would say is that there's some really good best practices in dentistry, but to actually think broader than that and to actually look to emulate best practices from other sectors. So from a front desk perspective, I'd argue that some of the best practices are in hospitality, for example. So we've all got very fond memories of being to a fantastic holiday. And part of it was because when you walked into that hotel, the staff made you feel amazing. And that's before you even gone into your room, and you already feel amazing and you already feel excited. And I think a lot of dental patients, are also feeling excited because if with the right treatment, their oral health is going to get a lot better, their appearances and their confidence is also going to really improve as well. So I think it's about not to just emulate best practices in dental, but actually to look beyond healthcare and other sectors and borrow best practices from other sectors, give it a dental tweak, and make it your own.
Take from other industries best practices and give it a dental tweak. That's going to be, I think, our quote of the podcast. Subhash, this has been a brilliant conversation. Thank you for bringing such a sharp, practical, and commercially grounded perspective to the future of operational tech in dentistry. Where can our listeners connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. So if you look for Subhash Mishra, always love meeting new people. So LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. I'd be more than delighted if any listeners want to reach out to me. They want to discuss, challenge me. I love all of that because every conversation I have with a leader makes me a little bit smarter, but only because I get to borrow some of their insights, really.
Yeah, I love that. And it's the same with podcasting as well. You get to talk to lots of interesting people and learn lots of amazing insights. And to everyone listening, if you got value from this episode today, make sure you subscribe, share, and follow across all platforms. Dentistry is evolving fast, and the organizations that understand tech, flow, and operational intelligence are the ones that will win in the next decade. You can connect with us at www.techdental.com, email info@techdental.com, or contact me directly on LinkedIn. I'm your host, Dr. Randeep, and this has been the Tech Dental Podcast. Scaling a business isn't a dream, it's a decision. This is the Tech Dental Podcast. And if you found value today, follow, share, and subscribe. This is the edge every dental leader needs.